Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind adjust the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
I had to be supremely confident and know who I am, namely a research physicist that was at the frontier of knowledge of extreme scale computational physics, and also at the frontier of knowledge of the then never before seen massively parallel supercomputer. I was the supercomputer scientist as well as the internet scientist that broadened his agnostic invention and did so to make his contributions to the development of the computer and internet and to make them to remain as timeless and as evergreen as possible. Back in the 1980s, I was the lone black face that attended 500 weekly research seminars. Each seminar speaker was a research mathematician or a research physicist or a research computer scientist. Each seminar speaker was visiting from Europe or Canada or somewhere else in the United States. For me to religiously attend and understand those multidisciplinary seminar topics demanded that I be a polymath that is at home in extreme scale algebra, partial differential equations of calculus, and the as yet invented massively parallel supercomputer. If I wasn't at the frontier of knowledge of those sciences, I would have discontinued attending those scientific research seminars, and I would not have been the cover stories of dozens of scientific publications. Prior to my discovery of how to parallel process across processors that shared nothing between each other, some research vector processing supercomputer scientists had a one-to-one conversation with me. They were impressed with my parallel supercomputer discovery in progress. From the 1970s through 80s, they were impressed enough to describe me as an up-and-coming supercomputer scientist to be watched. That was the reason 6 American institutions courted me and supported me with scholarships and fellowships, and did so for 16 continuous years onward of a scholarship letter that was dated September 10, 1973. After those 16 years of study and research in the United States, my confidence did not come from my winning the top prize in supercomputing. I won that prize in 1989. My confidence in my intellectual ability to work alone and to solve the grand challenge problem of supercomputing arose because I programmed supercomputers nearly every day of those 16 years. I programmed 2 raised to power 16 commodity off-the-shelf processors that encircled the globe in the way the internet does. I message passed or emailed across those 65,536 processors and across 16 times 2 raised to power 16 email wires. I programmed supercomputers for 16 years. On June 20, 1974, in Corvallis, Oregon, United States, I was programming the one-time world's fastest supercomputer that was rated at 1 million instructions per second. On July 4, 1989, in Los Alamos, New Mexico, United States, I discovered the answer to the grand challenge question of supercomputing. That grand challenge question was clear-cut, namely, how can I reduce 65,536 days or 180 years of time to solution on only one processor that is not a member of an ensemble of processors to only 1 day of time to solution across a new internet that is a new global network of 65,536 processors. Put differently, the grand challenge question was how can I compress 180 computer years into one supercomputer day? In 1989, I was in the news headlines because I provided the first clear-cut answer to that clear-cut question. I was in the news headlines because I articulated my discovery of the parallel supercomputer as a new internet that I visualized as a small copy of the internet. I articulated that new supercomputer with a clarity that was echoic retentive, and I did so when other supercomputer scientists were providing extremely nuanced and overly obfuscated lectures. Research computer scientists were committing the cardinal sin of publishing abstract papers that did not explain their contributions to the development of the supercomputer and their contributions to the ever-growing body of knowledge of modern computer science. In scientific research, the search is for new knowledge and not for a journal paper. Writing a scientific research paper is not the finish line, but for an academic, merely publishing a paper is his finish line. What is Philip Emeagwali known for? My discovery of practical parallel processing changed the way people perceive me. Parallel processing changed the way we think. Parallel processing is an entirely new approach to computer science and one that ushered a new era in supercomputing. Parallel processing was the technology that was mocked and ridiculed as a huge waste of everybody's time. Parallel processing is now the vital technology that underpins the world's fastest computers and that extends the boundaries of human knowledge. For me, Philip Emeagwali, my discovery of the parallel supercomputer was my stepping stone that enabled me to step from the serial and vector processing supercomputers of the 1980s and earlier to the parallel supercomputers of today. Those serial processing supercomputers became obsolete because they cannot be used to solve the toughest problems arising in abstract calculus, large-scale algebra, and extreme-scale high-resolution computational physics. The supercomputers of the 1980s cannot accurately solve many real-world problems because they only computed in a step-by-step serial or vector processing fashion instead of supercomputing in the radically different parallel processing method or dividing the grand challenge problem into 1 million smaller problems and mapping those divided problems and solving them with a one problem to one processor correspondence and mapping them across an ensemble of 1 million commodity off-the-shelf processors that each operated its own operating system and that each shared nothing, and solving them at once or in parallel. Back in the 1970s and 80s, my massively parallel processing supercomputer research focused on making discoveries rather than on writing about theories. A theory is an idea that is not positively true. Each year, billions of theoretical papers are published within the field of computer science, with none contributing to the development of the computer. A vacuous theoretical article that was never read and that described no discovery is incentivized over a groundbreaking discovery. For that reason, the academic scientist lacks public stature. As a result of that publish or perish syndrome, the scientific paper became a distracting background noise. In 1989, I was in the news headlines because I discovered that parallel processing will become the vital technology that will make it possible for the supercomputer of today to be super. I discovered that parallel processing is the irreducible essence of the modern supercomputer. Parallel processing is the most important technology within the supercomputer. Parallel processing redefined the computer and enabled us to see the computer, the supercomputer, in a new light. Massively parallel processing provides extreme-scale computational scientists with the incredible supercomputing power that makes it possible to solve grand challenge problems that would otherwise be impossible to solve. With a market share of $20 billion a year, the parallel supercomputer is used to tackle the world's biggest challenges, such as answering the biggest questions arising in science, engineering, medicine, and business. From mathematics to physics to computer science, the supercomputing paradigm has shifted from the single processor supercomputer to the parallel supercomputer. My contribution to this paradigm shift was that I was the first person to figure out the immensely complicated procedure of dividing a real-world grand challenge problem into 65,536 smaller problems and figuring out how to distribute those 2 raised to power 16 problems and how to map them in a one problem to one processor corresponded manner that was nearest neighbor preserving, and how to map them to as many commodity off-the-shelf processors that outline and define a new internet that I invented. The grand challenges are the 20 biggest questions in computer science. Today's grand challenge questions are more complex than that of yesterday. The discovery of practical parallel processing changed the way geologists search for and recover crude oil and natural gas, and changed it from simulating on only one processor that is not a member of an ensemble of processors to simulating across up to 10 million processors that were tightly coupled to each other. Similarly, parallel processing changed the way the climate modeler predicts global warming and changed the ways the computational mathematician and the supercomputer scientist compute for the answers to their biggest questions. Parallel processing changed the way we understand computer science and changed the way computer scientists understand the supercomputer. Parallel processing changed the way we find crude oil and natural gas. In the old sequential processing way, the petroleum reservoir that is 1 mile deep and the size of a town is crudely simulated on only one isolated processor. In my new parallel processing way that I discovered on the 4th of July 1989, the petroleum reservoir is accurately simulated across millions upon millions of processors that were tightly coupled to each other. For the research scientist that asked, what if parallel processing extends the boundaries of what can be discovered? For the research engineer that asked, what's next? Parallel processing extends the boundaries of what can be solved. For the research mathematician that asked, what's next? Parallel processing extends the boundaries of what can be achieved. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Insightful and brilliant lecture. Insightful and brilliant lecture.